Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly.
Please be seated, members. Good afternoon, members. I'm acting Speaker today by virtue of holding the position of being Father of the House. I will not dwell on the criteria for qualifying for that title. So, members, having been given notice by not less than 30 members under Standing Order 11, the Speaker has summoned the Assembly to meet today for the purpose of conducting the items of business that appear on the order paper. The first item of business is the election of the Speaker. Section 39(1) of the Northern Ireland Act provides that each Assembly shall, as its first business, elect from among its members a presiding officer and deputies. Therefore, the Assembly cannot conduct any further business until a Speaker and at least 2 Deputy Speakers have been elected. Members should be clear, without the election of a Speaker and 2 Deputies, no further business can proceed. I wish to advise members that the election of the Speaker will be conducted under the procedures set out in Standing Order 4. I will begin by asking for nominations. Any member may rise to propose that another member is elected as Speaker. I will then ask for the proposal to be seconded by another member as required by Standing Order 14. I will then verify that the member seconded is willing to accept the nomination. I will then ask for further proposals and follow the same procedure for each. When it appears that there are no further proposals, I will make it clear that the time for proposals has passed. If members indicate that they wish to speak, a debate relevant to the election may then take place, during which members will have up to 5 minutes to speak. At the conclusion of the debate or the conclusion of the nominations, if there are no requests to speak, I shall put the question that the member first proposed shall be Speaker of this Assembly. The vote will be on a cross-community basis. If the proposal is not carried, I shall put the question in relation to the next nominee, and so on until all nominations are exhausted. Once a Speaker is elected, all other nominations will fall automatically. Do I have any proposals for the office of Speaker of this Assembly? Call Mr. Butler.
Mr. Acting Speaker, I nominate Mr. Mike Nesbitt for the role of Speaker of the Chamber.
Is there a member to second the proposal? Does Mr. Nesbitt accept the proposal to be Speaker?
I do, Acting Speaker, and can we use VAR this time, please?
Thank you. I call Mr. O'Toole.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker, and thank you for stepping in these circumstances to keep us right. I nominate Mr. Patsy McGloon, MLA, to be the next Speaker of the Assembly.
Do we have a seconder?
I second that, Mr. Speaker.
And will Mr. McGloon accept the nomination to be Speaker?
Thank you very much. I accept.
Is there any further proposal? The time for proposals has expired. A number of members have indicated that they wish to speak. I would remind members that they may speak only once in the course of the debate. Members have up to 5 minutes in which to speak. I call Michelle. Point of order.
I wish to follow the House well in his role as Count Corla, and I wish the Count Corla to join with me in offering hearty coharges to the Derry senior footballers on their victory yesterday, the Ulster Championship victory yesterday. And my grandfather was a proud Mara Feldman, O'Donovan Russell man, and he's smiling down today. I want to wish them very well on their success and congratulate them.
I'm sure there'll be much joy in the county of Derry today. Thank you for that. I call Michelle O'Neill.
Garmegat, Can Corlia, and can I also concur in wishing or congratulating both Tyrone and Derry. Having the pleasure of representing East Tyrone and South Derry, then it was a good day for the constituency, so well done to all involved. Today marks 26 days since the people voted and gave the parties here represented in this chamber a mandate to constitute the Assembly, to form an executive, agree a budget and allocate £420 million from the Executive's bank account into the pockets of workers and families to help alleviate the burden as a result of the cost of living rises. The people have spoken and they now want action. They do not want protest. They want the parties and every single MLA elected to this democratic institution to get their sleeves rolled up and to get down to business. Since the election, Taoiseach Micheál Martin, Prime Minister Boris Johnson have all visited Belfast and met with the parties. I told Boris Johnson that the Tories are cynically using the people of the North and their democratic institutions as bargaining chips in their attempt to renegotiate with the EU, and they do so for narrow party interests. The majority of people voted democratically to stay within the EU and they rejected Brexit. There was certainly no consent to leave. The majority of new MLAs elected here in this chamber support the protocol, believe that it is workable if given the chance to be implemented, and believe that where any issues exist, they can all be resolved within the framework of the protocol and the Joint Committee. Last week, we had welcome news that Wrightbus had secured a deal to supply 60 hydrogen buses to Germany over the next 2 years. And I think this illustrates the benefits that our continued access to the EU single market is yielding for our local businesses, for our economy and for job creation. All parties, but also the British Government, should respect the democratic outcome and now fully support the application of the Good Friday Agreement. That is through power sharing and equality. The DUP standoff with the public is with the public and not with the European Union. The standoff is with those people that are crippled in pain, waiting for treatment and surgery on the NHS, who voted for us to tackle the waiting list by investing an extra £1 billion in our health service. The stark figures which we saw last week from the Department of Health show that almost 360,000 people are now on a waiting list. We need an executive in place to reduce waiting lists, to hire more doctors and nurses, and to fund vital mental health and cancer services today. I and we in Sinn Féin are committed to making health the Executive's #1 priority for the next 3 years. We are committed to investing in health, tackling waiting lists and ensuring you can get access to your GP when you need one. We need to protect the health service, resist Tory underfunding and attempts to dismantle the NHS. People rightly and deserve and want their politicians to work together to prioritise these very important issues. When the Assembly, Executive and North-South bodies, the East-West relations were all restored back in January 2020, and it was at that time with a shared commitment to deliver public services, societal reforms and a future that our people need and deserve. I think over that period we demonstrated, however, that politics and when there's a unity of purpose, when parties work together with that determination, that we can deliver for the public we serve. Ceann Comhairle, as I stand here today, I am ready to work with others and to lead an executive to make politics work for everyone and to demonstrate that real change is possible. Working together, we can prioritise health and housing and education and create more jobs in a stronger economy. We can build a more progressive and modern society based on fairness and equality. To those who disrupt the present, who threaten our future, need to realise that there is no going back, only forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today's recall is another attempt at majority rule and has no credibility when it comes forward from the party that kept these institutions down for 3 years, and the public will see the hypocrisy for what it is from Sinn Féin. This isn't a serious attempt to restore the principles of power sharing and these institutions. It's a stunt. Serious efforts would be working with us to try and get the barriers removed that is creating the instability that is stopping these institutions from being thwarted. Instead, what we've had over the past 3 weeks from we last met to elect a Speaker has been Republic entitlement, has been majority supremacy from the Alliance Party, no less, the party of the cross community that have abandoned that territory and now unashamedly join with the SDLP and Sinn Féin, joining for majority rule, calling for the Belfast Agreement to be changed so that these proceedings can proceed without unionists having their say. We've had disrespect shown to the unionist community. Again, the Alliance and the SDLP stopping the union flag from flying from this building on Saturday. We've had the denigration of the unionist community from one media outlet in particular. Demands for majority rule weren't allowed in the past, and they won't be allowed today. We've had 2 years of raising our concerns around the protocol and its implications, and that not one single unionist member of Parliament, member of this Assembly or local government councillor gives its consent. We had the ignoring of that by members of this House. Three motions calling for the rigorous implementation of the protocol. Jeffrey Donaldson gave space, was gracious in that, extended his periods of grace periods for this executive, and instead we had other parties taunting him, calling on him to take action to withdraw from the executive. But, Mr. Speaker, progress is being made. Not one party in this House anymore calls for the rigorous implementation of the protocol. The Republic of Ireland even says that there has to be changes. We were told that there would be no renegotiation of the protocol. Now the European Union recognise change needs to come. So I want to welcome the progress that this party has been able to gain and achieve over the past 2 weeks, when it was denied to us for over 2 years. Who, Mr. Speaker, in this House wants the grace periods to end? Who in this House is ready for the £500 million support that the government provides to traders to overcome the barriers down the Irish Sea? Not one member of this House supports the imposition of that cost to our business. Not one member of this House wants the grace periods to end. So I call upon a recommitment from the parties who have recalled this Assembly today to join in the spirit of the Belfast Agreement, which you all supported, that called for true power sharing between unionists and nationalists. So let's make progress. Let's commit to those principles. And I hope we can get to a stage where this House is recalled and we do elect a Speaker. We are able to form a new executive. But the time for words is over. It is action that we need to see. And the UK government have it within their gift to deliver that action. The European Union have it within their gift to make the changes that need to be made in order to have these institutions up and running on a power-sharing basis. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call Andrew Muir.
Thank you, Acting Speaker. I was elected to this Assembly to deliver for my constituents right across North Belfast, and indeed right across society here in Northern Ireland. And the very fact that I, along with many of my newly elected representatives across the Alliance benches here, are being denied the right to do so by the DUP is nothing short of shameful, and it stinks of egotism. There is much talk today about the protocol for the Unionist community, about issues for the Unionist committee. But actually the hardships right across Northern Ireland now are not just affecting one section of our community, they are affecting everyone. That is why we are happy to nominate a Speaker today, and indeed we are content to support either Patsy McGlone or Mike Nesbitt. For us, the importance isn't about who fills the chair, but that we get someone to fill the chair. We need a Speaker so that we can actually scrutinise the work of the departments. Indeed, there wasn't executive caretaker ministers in the last collapse of the Assembly. So there is no grandstanding, there is no showboating here today. Indeed, it's the stunt itself for the past few weeks is on the heads of the DUP. We need an executive up and running so that we, all of us in positions of responsibility, can actually take those decisions to ease people's hardships. And any argument that the Conservative government is delivering for people in Northern Ireland does not stack up. There are simply too many questions. In fact, the Chancellor last week couldn't answer simple questions as to what happens with the £400 payment. The thought probably hadn't even crossed his mind, because let's face it, Northern Ireland is not the priority. The people's hardships here are not the priority of the Conservative government. But if we could access that support through the Executive and more of the £435 million currently sitting, then just maybe we could restore public confidence. But I am sure that there is something that we have the ability to restore, and that's people's dignities. Currently, people right across Northern Ireland for years have had to access food banks. For the past few months, those in working poverty, for the past few years, those on social security benefits and working poverty are having to access food banks more and more. They're not able to provide for themselves and for their children. They're choosing between heating their homes or between eating. They are borrowing for family, or they're quite simply doing without. There is much that can be done by an executive to tackle the cost of living crisis, whether it's a childcare strategy, anti-poverty strategy, or the review of the welfare reform mitigations and the implementation of the recommendations that have been made by expert panellists that were put in place by the executive, the system that is designed to support those in acute financial distress. All of these important strategies, which so much work and expertise have gone into, are just sitting on a shelf. They're gathering dust. Meanwhile, parents and mothers cannot afford to feed themselves and their own children. At the heart of this cost of living crisis is our government's failure to act, and that is something that we all take responsibility for. But we are ready to make decisions to alleviate those stresses and give people who have been voiceless for so long hope. Hope that things can be better, hope that life can be more comfortable, and hope and resolve to continue, because as it is, people cannot go on much longer. And I don't doubt that members of the DUP are dealing daily with the pleas from help that I and members of my party, of SDLP, of Sinn Féin and the UUP are dealing with every day. Most recently, for example, a mother in North Belfast contacted me who didn't send her kids to school because she couldn't afford any money to buy them a break. She couldn't afford to get her child new school shoes, and she didn't want her child to be shamed or feel embarrassed. She cries herself to sleep every single night because she feels that she is failing as a mother, but she's not. We are failing her. And it's not for our lack of trying. Because believe me, those of us who want to get on with the job are more than desperate to do so. How long we must continue in this crisis after crisis? Acting Speaker, we are committed to the Good Friday Agreement. We are committed to power sharing. But we can no longer accept the irresponsible decisions and consequences that affect our people. This is why we need reform. Over 70% of this chamber want to elect a Speaker and get on with governing. Holding our society to ransom is unacceptable. Those of us who want to get on the job of governing should be able to do so. Let's not just hope for something for our people. Let's actually act and deliver for them. Thank you.
Thank you. I apologise to the member for that misunderstanding at the start. I call Robbie Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. And I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you to the seat, and I hope that you won't be sitting there too many times. And as the father of the house, won't be too many in-house jokes in the UUP room, I'm sure. Maybe it all went on this morning. But I welcome the chance, Mr. Acting Speaker, albeit in a potentially artificial setting, to nominate my colleague and friend, Mr. Mike Nesbitt, for the position of Speaker. I do so in full confidence that Mike is indeed the right person for that role. Mike's attributes are many, but his political leadership and his confidence is perhaps only eclipsed by his unparalleled articulation. I struggle to say that word, but he is incredibly articulate. We know I do enjoy listening to him, and I know that many across this chamber indeed enjoy Mike's participation here. Mike is responsible for me being here today, Mr. Acting Speaker. As a councillor to the Lisburn and Castlereagh City Council, I received a call from him one day, and he asked me to come and visit Stormont, and it was my first visit to Stormont. I'd never been here before. He spoke about Northern Ireland, a Northern Ireland for everyone, and his brand of unionism, which very much resonated with my own. And it was his confidence and a belief in my ability, I suppose, that contributed me to enter the fray. And it's a real privilege today to return that favour and formally nominate Mr. Mike Nesbitt for the role of Speaker. Now, I have referred to this sitting today as potentially artificial, because we will know in a short matter of time if we can convince the party to my right whether they might make a move today. But whilst I've said it's kind of artificial, it's absolutely within the rules to do this. And I would hope that the DUP actually show a graduated response, as has been articulated by the DUP leader in regards to their response to the moves by the British government with regard to the protocol, which I agree with them is absolutely unfair, and particularly unfair to the people that elected me in Lagan Valley. Having covered the ground across Lagan Valley and having referred to it, I can attest, however, given that the DUP were clear on the doorsteps about not nominating for First Minister or indeed Deputy First Minister without the protocol being addressed, at no point was the matter of nominating for Speaker mentioned. That, along with the co-option in place of the DUP leader, has left many in Lagan Valley, many of the voters shaking their heads and feeling misled. Mr. Acting Speaker, my leader spoke here a couple of weeks ago, and he majored on the silence of this place while the people of Northern Ireland battle with crippling waiting lists, the healthcare under so much pressure, and I have to pay absolute respect to the Minister that we had in health over the pandemic, because there is no one, and there wasn't a door that I knocked that didn't say that we didn't have the right person in the right place at the right time. We have the cost of living crisis, which is getting worse every single day. And whilst I call on the DUP to at least enable the Assembly to function and ministers to be scrutinised by supporting our nomination today, we at least can agree that the issues that I've spoken of will not disappear. And indeed, they need to be addressed now because they're getting worse. And with that in mind, the UUP have written today to the head of the civil service to convene all-party talks to establish a programme for government, and the Minister for Finance to reopen the public consultation on the budget to allow our people to let us know what they want in terms of spending their money. And these are measures that I believe can and should be done now in some way to restore the confidence with the people of Northern Ireland that we all purport to serve. Mr. Acting Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to once more nominate Mr. Mike Nesbitt for the role of Speaker of this House.
I call Matthew Toole.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. And as I said before, I hope you don't have to spend too long in that chair, but thank you for standing in today to oversee proceedings, such as they are, Mr. Acting Speaker. A couple of weeks ago when we met, I proudly nominated Patsy McGlone, MLA, to be Speaker of the Northern Ireland Assembly. Today, I'm nominating Patsy again. I hope, but I don't expect, that today I will be successful. Our party will be successful in nominating Patsy, and this Assembly will be successful in nominating Patsy for the role. He is, in our view, the outstanding candidate to be Speaker of the Assembly. In more than 3 decades in politics, he has shown his commitment to cross-community politics, to delivery for people, to serving the people of Mid-Ulster and across this region. He's been in this Assembly since 2003. He's a former General Secretary of the SDLP, and he's been Deputy Speaker of this Assembly since 2016. He is a committed parliamentarian, a sure hand, a fair mind, and someone who would be ideal to lead this institution. We will nominate him today, and we will keep nominating him until certain parties in this chamber come to their senses and allow us to get back and do our jobs. We know, in all probability, that today the DUP will not let us elect a Speaker. Today is another opportunity to elect, first of all, a Speaker, and then First and Deputy First Ministers to enable the people who were returned here by the electorate just a few weeks ago to come in and do their jobs. I want to pause for a minute and reflect on the Democratic Act that everyone in this room participated in a few weeks ago. We went out indoors in our constituency, we knocked on hundreds, thousands of doors and asked people for their vote. A precious, precious thing. Politics isn't about politicians. It isn't about those of us who get in a chamber and stand up and make speeches and seek office. It's about the people we serve. That's what it's supposed to be about in democracy. And to be honest, Mr. Acting Speaker, I don't know how the party opposite can face the people who had asked for a vote. I don't know how it can face them, blocking us from even electing a speaker to have debates and to hold shadow ministers to account. It is genuinely abhorrent, an unconscionable thing to do, to breach the trust of people from whom you have sought a vote. The thing we should be doing here today is electing, first of all, a speaker and then First Ministers to deal with an appalling cost of living crisis, to deal with a health service crisis which sees nearly a third of our population on a waiting list. In relation to the cost of living crisis, the SDLP has a bill ready. We tried to move emergency legislation before the Assembly dissolved for the election, and we'll try and move it again should a speaker be nominated. But in all probability, the party opposite won't let us. Why is the DUP holding the people of Northern Ireland to hostage? Why? They say it's all about the protocol. The protocol is an international treaty signed between the UK and the European Union. It wasn't negotiated by the people of Northern Ireland, it wasn't negotiated by MLAs. But since you've mentioned the role of MLAs, the number of MLAs who support the protocol went up in the last election. But the DUP have decided that the people who will be made to pay for their arrogance, for their intransigence, are the people of Northern Ireland, people who now can't heat their homes, people whose family members are stuck on waiting lists. It is, as we've discussed already, truly appalling. I don't know what else to say, Mr. Acting Speaker, about the behaviour of the DUP, but I will say this. You talk about consent. You talk about the failure of the unionist community and the people who elected you to offer consent for the protocol. I acknowledge that your party doesn't like the protocol. Would you acknowledge that my party and other parties in this chamber have an equal objection to Brexit itself? No. No. Consent means apparently simply the consent of the DUP. Shameful. Utterly shameful. I hope when you leave this chamber today, having blocked us from appointing a speaker again, that you hold your heads in shame when people who are struggling to heat their homes, struggling to feed their families, and worried about their parents or their family members on a waiting list. I hope you can hold your heads high when you face them, because I couldn't.
I call Jim Allister.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. This patently is a stunt sitting of this Assembly, initiated by Sinn Féin and their ever-willing little helpers in the Alliance Party. And if it's more than that, it's riven with the most base hypocrisy. The very first speaker in this debate, Michelle O'Neill, was the very Minister of Health who walked out of government not for 3 weeks, not for 3 months, but for 3 years, caring nothing about waiting lists, caring nothing about the sick, but now coming here to lecture us on those very subjects. Miss O'Neill and her party are not bringing forward a proposition to try and resolve this impasse. They're trying to bring forward a proposition to break the resolve of unionists to oppose the iniquitous protocol. That's what today is about. To try and coerce, cajole unionists to give up the key essential leverage that they have against the iniquitous protocol. I trust it won't work today. I trust it won't ever work until that protocol is gone, because no unionist who's awake at all, sadly that maybe doesn't include all, but no unionist who is awake at all to the protocol can ever come to terms with the fact that under that protocol, Great Britain, the other part of this nation, is decreed to be a foreign country. Therefore, its goods must be checked, as if those goods were coming from Bolivia rather than Britain. That is such an affront to my citizenship, to unionist position, that it can never be accepted. And then you top that off by saying to members of this elected assembly, you should have no power over many of the laws that govern your constituents. You should have no power to change laws that govern trade, economy, all the things that the protocol controls. That is such an affront that no Democrat, unionist, nationalist or other should be prepared to live under. So I'm very clear to this House that I trust the attempt to break the resolve of unionism will fail and continue to fail. Unionism needs to hold its nerve. It is doing the right thing. And in doing that right thing, it has no option but to continue to repudiate and make it very clear. You can't have the protocol and you can't have Stormont at the same time. This protocol is about dismantling the union. That's why Sinn Féin are its cheerleaders. It's about dismantling Brexit. That's why Alliance are cheerleaders. But it also now you need to come to realise is about dismantling this assembly, and on your head be that, because that is the course you have chosen to take. The only advantage of this debate today, Mr. Speaker, is that though there will be an echo chamber debate about all these issues, it does give one the opportunity, which I wish to take, to place on record the fact that Wednesday is the centenary of the formation of the Royal Ulster Constabulary, who served this country with such gallantry, with such selflessness, which paid such a high price to the terrorists who are represented in this House today. And of course, later in this week, we also have the momentous occasion of the Platinum Jubilee of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. What a remarkable achievement. 70 years to rule over us. Long may she rule over us indeed. Thank you.
I call Jerry Carroll.
Speaker, it's clear more than ever, some 3 weeks after the election results, that the actions of the DUP are causing more and more people to be furious with their refusal to form an executive. People have been left to the woes of monopoly energy companies to charge whatever they like for the necessities of life, and are rightly asking what will ministers here do about it. What will they do to tackle the fact that heads of companies like BP are arrogantly bragging that their organisation and industry is a cash machine for shareholders and the wealthy? People are languishing in jobs where employers aren't paying a level that allows them to live with some enjoyment and dignity in their lives without being forced to count every single penny. And people are asking here, what are ministers doing about it? We have an unbelievable situation, Speaker, where the average rent in Belfast is extortionate and people are struggling, whilst most landlords rake it in. When you consider the fact that rent went up again last year and continues to soar, while landlords in student areas such as the Holy Lands and the like are pulling in £1.8 billion from renters, making this city, Belfast, the most lucrative for landlords, literally putting profit before people and decent housing conditions. We have a situation where teachers in one of the biggest unions, NASUWT, are balloting for strike action over inadequate pay, poor terms and conditions as well. Assembly staff in this building are still challenging changes to working conditions and inadequate pay offers. I stand with them in that fight. I urge every single other MLA to do so and to refuse to cross their picket line. There can be no scabbing in a cost of living crisis. In truth, Temporary Speaker, if an executive was formed today or tomorrow, it could, and I emphasise could, act on all these issues, but ministers and members had the chance to act on these issues before, but refused to take the required action in the last mandate or the mandate before that. Truth be told, the past record leaves a lot to be desired, to put it mildly. In every single measuring stick, the big parties here failed miserably to reduce poverty, increase wages and tackle the wealth inequality that exists here. The last executive endorsed pay cuts across the board for workers, disgracefully sided with landlords when he had the chance to reduce private sector rents, and have left the wealthy unscathed during the pandemic. They failed to protect people. Not just my party's assessment, Speaker, but the recent Ulster University study found that many households here were struggling before the recent cost of living crisis increase. As part of the Life and Time survey, the research conducted last year found that 62% of people didn't think the executive was doing enough to address poverty. So I ask the parties in this room who would form an executive potentially, what guarantees will they give the workers and everyone who especially has been on the front line during the pandemic that they will not plough ahead with pay offers that are below the rising rate of inflation again? If inflation is sitting at 10%, the highest in 40 years, and is set to rise, if that's the case, then nobody in this society should be left to stomach pay offers below this rate. To repeat, as I've said before, a deal below inflation is a real terms pay cut. Officially, inflation is at 10%, set to go higher, but we know even this doesn't truly reflect the cost of living increase, as food items are up by 20% and 50% in some aisles. At the same time, we see the profits of big supermarket chains like Tesco's literally double. What are ministers doing around capping the cost of food so people can afford their weekly shop and also afford to eat food that is good for their health now? If anything has been clear in the last 2 years, Speaker, especially, it's that leaving it up to the market doesn't work and only bolsters the profits and strength of shareholders and already super rich individuals. We need government action now. We need ministerial action now, regardless of whether an executive is formed today or whenever. There needs to be urgent action taken around these questions. But, Speaker, not just waiting for a resolution or an agreement in this building, it doesn't cut it in this period for me. Change is always slow coming from this building. Repeatedly and often it's been a block on progress in advance. We need to follow the likes of the Caterpillar workers in West Belfast and Larne, who are going on the offensive and challenging inadequate pay deals and changes to their job, which will see them forced into completing compulsory overtime without any say-so. Workers are right to take action now to fight back, and we should stand in solidarity and encourage every single one of them to do so. Thank you.
I call Declan Kearney.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I would like to talk to the members in Irish today. I would like to invite the members to put on the interpretation headphones. Mr. Speaker, just over 3 weeks ago, a majority of people spoke out loudly. They want a new era in politics. We were given a clear message: re-establish just power sharing, tackle the cost of living crisis, and correct the health system and provide sustainable public services. There's no doubt this is the will of the people, that these institutions work for the benefit of the people. The DP nor the Orange Order has no right to prevent power sharing in the North or the functioning of the Good Friday Agreement. The DUP's stance is reckless, indefensible and anti-democratic. The protocol threatens no one in the North. That is only a myth. The protocol is necessary. It is here to stay. As long as the DUP's stubbornness persists, families and people are suffering. Workers are struggling and public services are being destroyed.
There is no reason why a Speaker or First or Deputy First Minister should not be nominated today.
As long as the DUP continues with this irresponsible approach, the greater the damage that is being done. Therefore, important questions have to be asked. Is the DUP genuine about sharing power with other parties? or not? Is the DUP truly committed to the Good Friday Agreement, or is it not? As long as this democratic process is prevented, it seems that the DUP's stance has no connection to their concern about the protocol, but only further loss of power. The majority of elected members in this Assembly are in favour of progressive change in the direction of a society based on rights, positivity and optimism. The DUP has to answer the question: what are they in favour of? A progressive future or negativity and division? There are two choices before the DUP today, but friends, they only have one correct decision to make. Thank you very much.
I call Brian Kingston.
Mr Speaker, the Northern Ireland Protocol remains the greatest single obstacle to political stability in Northern Ireland and to the operation of the Northern Ireland Assembly. The DUP will continue to act to focus the minds of Her Majesty's Government and the European Commission on the need to address the fundamental errors of the Protocol. No, I'm not taking interruptions, thank you. It is no coincidence that we have seen greater movement on this matter in the past 2 weeks since the DUP took this stand than we've seen in the previous 2 years. The DUP is a pro-devolution party. We strongly support the operation of the Northern Ireland Assembly and Executive as per political agreements, including the principle of parallel consent. Not a single Unionist MLA, not one, supports the Northern Ireland Protocol imposed upon us and foolishly agreed to by Boris Johnson's government. It is for other parties in this Assembly to explain if they think the need for parallel consent only applies when nationalists object. Does it not also apply for the Unionist people of Northern Ireland? Our objections must and will be addressed. Since last September, our party leaders made it clear that we could not continue with business as normal under the Northern Ireland Protocol. The DUP made it abundantly clear, as a manifesto pledge in the recent election, that we would not support the formation of a new executive unless our government brought about the replacement of the Protocol. We have set out our 7 tests for how we will judge that. For any who dispute it, I can assure them that we have very strong backing for our position within the Unionist community. I hear it every day. I heard it here in the grounds of Stormont on Saturday and along the route into the city centre, when over 125,000 people gathered for the centenary of Northern Ireland Parade, and a wonderful day it was too. And we look forward to Her Majesty's Platinum Jubilee celebrations later this week, and we congratulate Her Majesty on that unique achievement. The DUP will continue to stand firmly by our manifesto pledge. People do well to remember that what we have currently is not the full implementation of the Protocol. We are in a grace period, and our access to the UK internal market and the impact on our people and on household bills will be much worse still if that ended without the Protocol being rewritten. For those who say, let's get the Assembly up and running and we can talk about it, this is not the level at which the necessary powers reside. The powers lie with Her Majesty's Government and with the European Commission. It's not good enough for Maros Sefcovic to repeatedly turn up to talks and say he doesn't have a mandate to make the necessary changes. If the EU won't move, then our government must make the necessary changes and undo the harm that they previously and foolishly agreed to. We will judge them on actions, not just words. There is a great prize for us all in terms of political stability if we can get the Protocol issue sorted. we would ask other parties to work with us and support us in achieving that stability. Finally, I hope that all MLAs have a long list of constituency work to get on with, as I do. Despite some pretence otherwise, we do have ministers in place to make ministerial decisions. Indeed, Sinn Féin appointed a new infrastructure minister just last week, and the Sinn Féin finance minister allocated an extra £400 million to the Department for Health the week before. Last week's American delegation only reinforced the suspicions regarding the motives and partiality of such delegations. However, I did note that they represented the Ways and Means Committee. Perhaps some of the other parties here could bear that in mind. Instead of trying to block the spending of public money for party political reasons during this period, they should work with Her Majesty's Treasury and other ministers to ensure that ways and means are found to deliver these public funds, as they surely can be delivered. The DUP will do all within our powers to see that those funds are
Will the
delivered.
member bring his remarks?
And I'm in my last sentence. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And regarding the Northern Ireland Protocol, we will stand by our pledge. We will use our political leverage. We will focus minds. We will bring matters to a head, and we will hold our government's feet to the fire until they bring about the necessary changes to the protocol. Thank you.
I call Ewan Tennyson.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker, and I rise as the first member of this House to have been born after the Good Friday Agreement was signed. It beggars belief that we're here today, 24 years on, with those institutions once again being placed in jeopardy. My generation was promised more than this. We were promised not just peace, but progress. Progress that has never been fully realised because of the poor political leadership that is on display in this chamber today. It is both difficult to fathom and yet at the same time depressingly predictable that we are here today, 4 weeks on from an Assembly election, without a functioning Assembly or Executive. A sad indictment on our politics at any time, but particularly shameful when people in our community are struggling to heat and eat and are facing some of the worst hospital waiting lists anywhere in Western Europe. Since the election, the Alliance Party has been here every Monday doing what we can to serve our constituents and willing to get on with the full jobs we were elected to do. Today is no exception. Again, we stand ready to support the nomination of a Speaker, and over the course of today's proceedings will likely support both Patsy McGlone and Mike Nesbitt for the role. Indeed, little over 2 weeks ago, over 70% of members in this chamber, nationalist, unionist and none of the above, supported the appointment of a Speaker. My vote and the votes of my 16 colleagues were effectively disregarded. How can it be that the votes of a cross-community party be excluded from a cross-community vote? That one party be able to block an appointment is an affront to democracy and disrespectful to the people that I represent. The case for reform has never been clearer. Shamefully, the DUP turned up, signed the register, took their salaries and then refused to do the jobs they were elected to do and serve our community. They claim to be exercising leverage. They are treating the most vulnerable in our community as leverage. Their actions over the past number of weeks will not hurt Boris Johnson or the EU, but it will hurt people languishing on waiting lists. It will hurt people relying on food banks to feed their kids. The DUP claim to have a mandate for this course of action, having never mentioned blocking formation of an Assembly at any point during the election campaign. But let's be very clear, we all have mandates in this chamber. The majority of MLAs want to be pragmatic on the protocol, and an even greater majority want to get on with the job of actually governing. Mr. Acting Speaker, we've heard much today about the Good Friday Agreement and about equality. You will forgive me for taking no lectures from the party to my right on either. They have spent a lifetime railing against both. The lowest moment of the recent election campaign was when I knocked a door and a lady came to her front door in a winter coat. She said the kids were at school, she couldn't afford to pay for gas, so she had to save for when they got home. It is beyond me, after 2 years of a pandemic, when our people and public services are on their knees, that some still seek to pursue even further chaos and instability. Over the past 2 weeks since the last sitting, the cost of living crisis has deepened. Even further funds have gathered waiting to be allocated. Today, we have an opportunity to end this seemingly interminable drift, to finally deliver real leadership built on hope, not fear, delivery, not division, to build a more fair, shared and equal society. For the sake of all of the people that we represent, I urge the colleagues to my right, change course, do the right thing, support the election of a Speaker today, and let's serve our entire community together. Thank you.
I call Conor Murphy.
Well, August Cancorla. The party opposite have said they have a mandate for the position they take today. I mean, like the previous Speaker, I have never heard them over the course of the election advocating that they would block a Speaker being elected to the Assembly being able to do its function. I didn't hear them saying they would withdraw or continue to withdraw for the Executive for any lengthy period of time either. I heard them talk about their 5-point plan and how they were going to fix all of the problems that we currently face. And I don't believe that many of them that I know want to have implement a mandate which is effectively punishing people. And that's the position that they have taken today. It is to punish the people that we represent. It doesn't punish us. We can turn up here as long as we want. We can go off and do the work for our constituents, but it punishes the people that we represent. Last week there were welcome interventions from London in relation to cost of living issues. But we now have to find a way to work to make sure that those supports get to people. So my colleague Deirdre Hargey here has to work with DWP in London to ensure that those payments which will come through the benefit system actually reach the people that they're intended, the people who are most in need and will be most in need as this cost of living crisis bites deeper. I will work with Treasury, and Treasury fully understood, and I had dialogue with them last week, fully understood the position that we're in without an executive. They know the legal advice that we have, fully understood that we cannot take decisions in relation to that £400 household support for people. And of course I will work as best I can with my department to try and ensure that that money does go to people. But let me be very clear, there is absolutely no certainty that we will be able to get the £400 per household out by the autumn. No certainty whatsoever, because the first hurdle we have to overcome is the fact that we do not have an executive in place to take that decision in relation to it. But nonetheless, we will continue to work. The big issue, as well as the £435 million that we now have sitting, heading towards £500 million we have sitting, that could be going out the door today in terms of support for people in the here and now, we can't allocate. We have to sit on it. The pot actually grows and has grown since. And that could be today and tomorrow going out to households to assist those who are trying to struggle to meet the challenges that they're meeting in terms of cost of living, to try and provide support for their families and for others. But the big issue, and Mr Kingston has this entirely wrong, and I'll come to him in a minute. I'm not sure who provides the script for the DUP, but they all tend to try and spoof this part of it in a kind of a Trump-like fashion, that if you tell a lie, often enough people believe it. The big issue is the budget. And people in this chamber argued and clamoured for a multi-annual budget for the last number of years, and we finally got one. And part of the initiative in relation to that draft budget was to match the priority that we had all spoken about. All the parties, even before we came back into the executive, all the parties declared that we were going to make health the priority. And it wouldn't really matter in that sense as to who took the position, because we would all support the health minister and we would ensure the funds were allocated. And then we had a disagreement over the draft budget. But ironically, the DUP took the position of the draft budget and made it part of their election manifesto, which was to give £1 billion extra to health. But there's no additional £400 million allocated to health. The health minister is acting at risk because it's the only way he can try and get the support to the people that we collectively and your party collectively promised to support in the time ahead. So we're all acting outside and trying to stretch the boundaries of our limited ministerial authority in this time to undo the damage that you're causing on a daily basis. And can I just say, in relation to Mr Given trotted out the usual thing, and others have trotted out. Mr Allister's gone, but he wasn't in the room at the time, so I at least give him some credit for that. When the Assembly went down over RHI, every single party in this chamber asked the then First Minister to resign to allow an inquiry to be set up. Every party. with the exception of the DUP. She refused to do so. Martin McGuinness had to get off his sickbed then to come in and hand her a letter of resignation, because it was the only way we could take effect to try and deal with that scandal, get an inquiry set up, and then we went to an election. Within a matter of months, there was a deal on the table in February 2018, which the DUP signed up to. They sat in the rooms up the stairs with us, and they signed up to that deal. We told them, let's go out and announce it. They said, give us over the weekend to get it fixed. And by Monday, their MP team had scuppered the deal by rallying around the Orange Order, the UDA, and all the others to spook the horses. Absolute fact, because the reason no,
order, members, order.
Yes, the reason, Mr. Speaker, the reason.
The member must withdraw that comment. It is absolutely shameful that he would say that, and he needs to withdraw that right now.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's not a point of order for starters, but we let it go with that. The reason we know that is because the DUP told us that. And to say it's shameful that you talk to UDA, you talk to UDA all the time. You talk to UDA all the time, and the UVF. And the reason that we know that they scuppered the deal, so therefore we sat from February 2018, he wasn't in the room.
Order, please, please. Please. I've given, be quiet. I've given the Minister, Mr. Murphy, an extra minute. I'll let him finish.
Appropriate what Mr. Murphy has just said about my party.
There you go. Can I just say, so we sat from February 2018 for 2 full years with the same deal on the table that the DUP came back to in January 2020. So 2 years, when they trot out this lie about the 3 years, 2 years run you. 2 years run you where we sat waiting on you to come back to exactly the same deal when eventually you got your MP team in line in order to get the deal done over the line. So, Mr. Speaker, none of us want to be in this position. I have better things to do than to argue with these people across the way. I prefer that I was sitting around the table with these people actually working on the issues to try and deliver for support for the people that we represent. Get money into health service, fix the cost of living issues. That's what I'd like to see. I don't want to hear it chirping from the would-be First Minister on the other side of the table. But that's what we need to do. That's what the people elected us to do.
I call Gary Middleton. Yes.
Mr. Presiding Officer, at the end of a point of order, you afforded the member an extra minute. That is not in procedures, and I appreciate that your rulings are final. However, perhaps the officials would go and look at establish, because that could well be a precedent that you have established. The danger.
I'm sure the member will indulge the fact that I'm acting Speaker today, but I'll call the next Speaker. Was Gary Middleton.
Thank you, Acting Speaker. The recall of this Assembly today is nothing more than a distraction from the real issue and the real problem which is preventing these institutions from functioning, from our communities moving forward and progress in Northern Ireland. That's the Northern Ireland Protocol. Rather than trying to work for solutions and trying to get a resolution, we have another attempt today to ride roughshod over the concerns of the Unionist community. We've seen attempts after attempt by Sinn Féin and joined by their useful helpers in the Alliance and the SDLP to sneer, to look down and to try and laugh off the genuine concerns of the Unionist community. Northern Ireland power sharing works on the basis of parties working together. It works on the basis of consensus. It works on the basis of parties coming together and trying to move forward. Since the inception of the Northern Ireland Protocol, not one Unionist MLA or MP has supported it. Despite that fact, no, I won't. Despite that fact, Sinn Féin hasn't done one single thing in the spirit of respect, and we're seeing nothing but disrespect from the members opposite. Not one time in the interests of respect have they attempted to deal with the concerns or deal with the problem. In fact, when the DUP actually tried to bring the issue of the protocol to the executive whenever it was functioning, it was vetoed by Michelle O'Neill. It was vetoed actually from even getting on the agenda by Michelle O'Neill. So that's the type of respect that we're dealing with from the members opposite. The DUP at the election received a mandate in terms of dealing with the protocol and ensuring that we remove the IRC border. I want to make the message very, very clear today, and my colleagues have already done so. We are resolute to holding to those commitments. The unionist community is standing together. If you haven't noticed it, please wake up and see the unionist community is resolute in dealing with the Northern Ireland Protocol and restoring fairness within these institutions and ensuring that we have fair access to the UK internal market. We have, over this past 2 weeks, seen some progress from the UK government, despite the shameful delegation that came from the United States, came into Northern Ireland on supposedly a diplomatic visit, and they've left a more damaging, disgraceful message within our community. Basically, they came here and sided with the Republican agenda, which is completely and utterly unacceptable. And of course, we have Declan Kearney coming out today saying that the concerns are a myth. We have Mr O'Toole saying that he doesn't understand it. We have Mr Tennances saying that it's beyond him. I would urge the parties opposite to please get to grips with the unionist electorate. Understand that we're not going to be pushed to the side and that we're not going to be ignored. If Sinn Féin and other parties in this chamber are serious about making devolution work and serious about making these institutions work, then I would go back and look at 2019, the mistake that they made to move forward with the Northern Ireland Protocol without the support of the unionist community. That was a mistake then. It's a mistake now. I want to urge them to commit to making Northern Ireland work, making it work within the United Kingdom, and that's something that this party is resolute with, and we're not changing our position. Thank you, Acting Speaker.
I call Edwin Poots.
Mr Acting Speaker, and we're a bit of a Groundhog Day, but I welcome the opportunity for us to have the debate again and for the Northern Ireland public to hear the reasons, the very clear reasons, why we are not able to appoint a Speaker today and why we're not able to progress with the appointment of ministers. I very much wish that it wasn't the case. I very much desire that we get back into government as quickly as possible, but unfortunately those decisions will be taken elsewhere. Ms O'Neill, in her speech, talked much about the health service. This is the same Ms O'Neill who was the Minister for Health and walked out of her job. And whenever the walk-away Health Minister left her job, in the following 3 years, every quarter, waiting lists rose. Every quarter in that period of time. They rose exponentially. Whenever I was Health Minister and left the post in September 2014, we had the lowest waiting lists of any period of time at that stage, and I was getting criticised for the health waiting lists then. And they're over twice the length of time now. They're twice the number of people who are on those waiting lists. Ms O'Neill walked out of the Health Minister portfolio when the Bangor report was to be implemented. The reason for the health service waiting lists is the very person who is criticising it now, Michelle O'Neill. Own it. Own the health waiting list crisis, Michelle O'Neill. As for Mr O'Toole, he talked about us looking the electorate in the face. I did look the electorate in the face on Saturday. And the electorate are very clear that they support the position that the DUP are taking. Over and over and over again, we are getting the message, stay strong, do what you're doing, and don't give in. And I've been very clear about this. If you want the Belfast Agreement, and I expect most of you do, then you can't have the Northern Ireland Protocol. The two things are incompatible. And therefore, no, I'm not giving away because of limited time. The two things are incompatible. And the institutions of the Good Friday Agreement will not be brought together again while the Northern Ireland Protocol is in its current existence. And for Mr O'Toole to blandly dismiss, this is an international agreement between the European Union and the United Kingdom government. Yes, it is. But what's the title of it? The Northern Ireland Protocol. It's as if we, the people of Northern Ireland, shouldn't have any say in it. Shouldn't be concerned about it. Of course we are. As for Mr Kearney and his cost of living, because he emphasised heavily on the issue about the cost of living. He also said the protocol threatens no one, and that is patently untrue. The protocol is damaging household after household, industry after industry, right across Northern Ireland. But let's be very clear. The cost of the protocol is something which many businesses is currently soaking up, and that government is soaking up. But those costs are not going to be soaked up by either government or business for a long period of time. And the cost of living crisis is something that every household is going to be impacted by the Northern Ireland Protocol if we do not address the issues. And members should be standing with us in getting rid of the protocol, not in backing it up. Now, I note that we don't hear any more about the rigorous implementation of the protocol. But let's get a little bit further. That's good that you've got off that space. Now, that's to the benefit. But let's now get on to the space of what can we actually do to make things better for all of the people of Northern Ireland, because the DUP are very much fighting this battle on its own. We're not getting the support of the other executive parties in actually taking this issue on. But if we did, and Northern Ireland spoke as one voice and said, you know what, it is preposterous that we have all of these companies who are saying we don't supply Northern Ireland, because that's impacting upon people who can buy things cheaper online, for example, and it's impacting on their cost of living. But people want to ignore that. And my colleagues are doing our job, I would remind Mr Tennyson, as Minister of Agriculture, and indeed Mr Blair.
The member bring his remarks to a close.
Yes, thank you.
Will the member give way? And on the cost of living, does he not agree that the protocol prevents us from having the VAT reduction in Northern Ireland that the rest of the United Kingdom will benefit from?
Yeah, I thank the member. And
the member will have an extra minute.
I thank the member, and his point is quite correct. But I would say to Mr Tennyson, his colleague Mr Blair seems to realise that we are working. They maybe want to have a chat with him, because he put in a flood of questions last week, and I welcome them. They'll be answered to Mr Blair as we get on with our job. I'm at my work every day, and we're making decisions. We are making decisions, and many decisions. Now, I pose a question, where are the other ministers from the other parties? What are they doing? And perhaps we'll see a bit more activity coming from them in the future. Mr Murphy did say that Ms Hargey was negotiating with London about getting money distributed. So that 24-week period that we negotiated, back when those talks were ongoing, are proving useful in that people still have
the member bring his remarks to a close? Thank you.
Engaging, and people need to recognise that and realise it.
I call Daniel McCrossan.
Thank you, Mr Acting Speaker. Thank you for stepping in today and unfortunately having to preside over what has been an entirely shameful episode. Many people at home, Mr Acting Speaker, will be watching this with even more frustration than they were 4 weeks ago, because the message doesn't seem to have hit any way near the doors of the members in the opposite benches in the DUP. I am in my constituency office every day, Mr Acting Speaker, and I am listening to constituents every single day, and you can hit the table all you like, but there seems to be a lapse in reality in the benches of the DUP opposite, because the people on the phone to me, and I'm sure other members across this House, are not ringing and saying, my children can starve today as long as you sort the protocol. Or, I can't put clothes on my children's back, but it's okay, they'll do that, sort the protocol. Or, my mother is lying in a hospital bed dying, but it's okay, sort the protocol. Wake up and come back to earth. Totally, utterly ridiculous messing about. And this today isn't about real life. This is about a distraction move by the DUP. A distracting move by the DUP so they don't have to go into the office. And what they're standing over there doing is pointing the finger at everyone else around these benches. Mr Acting Speaker, today is about nominating a Speaker to enable the function to some degree, even if it is in shadow form, which is not perfect. But it is there to ensure that we can resolve the problems that people are facing in their homes, in their jobs, in schools, in hospitals, with the cost of living crisis, with addiction services, with mental health services, real-life problems. I don't know who's ringing you, but I can tell you one thing. They're not ringing the majority of members of this House saying, doesn't matter about everything else, prioritise the protocol. It's utter nonsense that you use this as an excuse. This place was built on compromise and agreement, and holding these institutions down will not resolve anything for any of our constituents. Not one. The reality is the DUP are so ashamed of their involvement in propping up Theresa May's government, so ashamed that they polished the big red bus that much that it reversed over the top of them. The reality is you broke it, you own it, and you have taken no responsibility for the fact that the Brexit protocol is here because of Brexit, a reckless Brexit that your party championed day and night. And where's it got our people? Where has it got our people? Here's a dose of reality for you. Mr. Acting Speaker, people are starving. People cannot feed their children. People can't heat their homes. I will briefly in a wee moment. People can't heat their homes. People can't even afford to travel to their jobs because of the price of fuel. People can't visit their loved ones in hospital because of the ongoing rules in place to prevent them going in great numbers. There's a reality here, folks. People have elected us all to resolve these problems. And regardless if the DUP accept this or not, no one gave you a mandate to fold your arms over there and stump your feet. And that's the reality. And I would love to meet one single constituent that says, fair play to you, say, my children will have no food tonight, but as long as you start the protocol by, as long as it takes you maybe a year. I'm not being flippant about it, but that's what it looks like from this side of the House. People are totally and utterly sick of it. And people watching today from home at you standing up there, distracting, hardly even mentioning, might I add, the cost of living crisis, talking about the protocol that is here because you championed Brexit. That's the reality. That's the reality. Take some ownership.
Member, please.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Take some ownership for the decisions that you have taken and the positions that you have adopted, because you seem to think everyone else will forget because you repeat the same lie over and over again. What are you going to do tomorrow? How long is this going to go on? How many people will die? How many families? And I'm listening to the DUP leader in the corner shouting at me, the real DUP leader, Mr. Allister, because the real reason you're in this position is because you're so fearful of that man and the TUV that you won't put people first. That's the reality. So listen, folks, a dose of reality. Families are struggling. People can't travel to their work. People are in hospitals.
Would the member bring his remarks to a close? Thank you.
Mr. Acting Speaker. But you need to get real here. You aren't elected to sit over there and do nothing. You are elected to resolve problems and deliver. So get back and do your work.
I call Emma Little-Pengelly.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. First of all, can I congratulate those members this morning who made their maiden speeches, and well done to all of those who contributed. I have to say, I am utterly dismayed by the tone and the nature of this debate this morning. Of course, we don't all agree. We all know that. I have been involved in this process from 2007, and I've worked with many of the members across this House. And the one thing that we all know is that to make this process work, we need to understand each other, we need to show some respect, and we need to try to work on solutions together. I am dismayed to hear the jeering and sneering from others about the concern of unionists. I am deeply dismayed to hear the genuine issues of unionism being described as nonsense or a tactic or some sort of a stunt. I am dismayed, quite frankly, to hear from the benches across not just the demeaning, disregarding and dismissing of the deep and genuine concerns of unionism that we've heard for the last 2 years, but actually now insults. I could easily say to any of the members in the benches across, when was the last time that you spoke to people who were in the IRA? I could easily say to people and call out the behaviour of the last number of years. In the 5 years of the last term, Sinn Féin brought down and kept the institutions down for 3 years. And what you've said today is that it's okay when we do it. It's okay when it's an issue that is important to Sinn Féin. But when it's an issue that is of concern to unionism, forget all about it. Get in there. You're talking nonsense. You're utterly dismissed.
Point of order. I can't hear what's being said by any of the speakers. There's too much chanting going on from my left and from my right at times. Could you rule to ask all the members to show a bit of decorum in this chamber? The people of Northern Ireland have been let down in many fronts, and some of the behaviour and some of the chanting that's going on is unacceptable.
Members, I think everybody has had an opportunity today to speak that wants to speak in proper order. So, please respect that and give speakers the courtesy of being heard. So, please, just exercise a little bit of courtesy to other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Yes.
Does the member recognise that whenever Mr Murphy was throwing his allegations about that the DUP are subject only to the decisions of the party officer team and the party executive team, unlike Sinn Féin, who seem to rely on the IRA Army Council?
Speaker will have an extra minute.
I thank the member for that contribution. The reality is that all of us have issues that matter deeply to us and matter deeply to the communities out there, and we must do our best to try to get those issues resolved. I would appeal to everybody around this chamber today that the only way that has ever worked in Northern Ireland is by us speaking to each other and trying to get solutions together. That has not happened for over 2 years. When the protocol was announced in late 2019, there was a full year before it came in on the 1st of January of 2021. In that year, we highlighted the many, many problems and concerns we had. We went to the British government, we went to Brussels, but indeed, rather than getting the compromises we needed, there were parties across this chamber that ran to Dublin and ran to Brussels and asked them to not give an inch, not to compromise, to rigorously implement the protocol as it stood. And of course, I don't have time, unfortunately. Unfortunately then, when it came into effect on the 1st of January of 2021, the problems emerged. We've seen some solutions, some tinkering around these areas and issues. But what we need now is a genuine resolution. The member opposite asked, what is it that the DUP stand for? The DUP believe in Northern Ireland and we want Northern Ireland to work. It cannot work if there is a deep fracture, and the fracture is caused by the Northern Ireland Protocol. We are all here today, and we can only continue. Our process, our assembly, our institutions is based on the concept of consent. Unionism is no longer consenting to be part of a process that demeans, disregards and dismisses and insults the genuine concerns. This is not just a unionist issue. Unless we get the protocol resolved, it'll cause huge paperwork, huge cost, passed on to the ordinary people of Northern Ireland at a time of cost of living crisis. This is bad and we need to get it resolved. I would appeal to all of you. Stop the shouting across the chamber, the jeering and the insults. Get around a table and find solutions. The sooner this issue is resolved, the sooner that the Northern Ireland Executive can get back and this place can function properly. But this is in all of our hands.
The question is that Mr. Mike Nesbitt be Speaker of this Assembly. All those in favour say aye. Contrary, no. To the lobbies, the question will be put in 3 minutes. Order, members. Order, members. Will you please resume your seats? Members, the question is that Mr. Mike Nesbitt be Speaker of this Assembly. All those in favour say aye, and contrary of any, no. Do we have tellers? Order, members, order. Tellers have been appointed as follows. Tellers for the ayes are John Stewart and Robbie Butler, and tellers for the noes are Keith Buchanan and Diane Forsyth. Clear the lobbies. The Assembly will divide. Ayes to my right, noes to my left. Order, order. Members, please resume your seats. Clerk, read the result.
53 members voted, of which 27 voted aye, 50.9%. No nationalists voted, of which none voted aye, 0%. 35 unionists voted, of which 9 voted aye, 25.7%. 18 others voted, of which 18 voted aye, 100%. 8 members who voted in both lobbies are not included in these results. The motion is negatived.
Thank you. The result, question has not been agreed. Unfasten the doors. The question shall now be put in relation to the second candidate. The question is that Mr. Patsy McGlone be Speaker of this Assembly. All those in favour say aye. Contrary, no. Order. I've been advised by the party whips in accordance with Standing Order 27(1)(ab) that there is agreement that we can dispense with the 3 minutes rule and move straight to the division. So I now call for tellers. Do we have tellers? Order, members. Tellers have been appointed as follows. Tellers for the ayes are Sinead McLaughlin and Colin McGrath. Tellers for the noes are Keith Buchanan and Diane Forsyth. Clear the lobbies. The Assembly will divide. Ayes to my right, noes to my left. Thank you. Secure the doors, please. Order, order. Members, please resume your seats. Clerk, read the result, please.
79 members voted, of which 53 voted aye, 67.1%. 34 nationalists voted, of which 34 voted aye, 100%. 27 unionists voted, of which 1 voted aye, 3.7%. 18 others voted, of which 18 voted aye, 100%. The motion is negatived.
The question has not been agreed. Unfasten the doors. The Assembly has been unable to elect a Speaker today, and the Assembly has been unable to conduct its first business. Therefore, we can proceed no further. Any further sittings of the Assembly can only be held to first elect a Speaker and Deputy Speaker. Under Section 39(2) of the Northern Ireland Act 1998, the current Speaker remains in office until a successor is elected. I therefore propose, by leave of the Assembly, to adjourn the sitting until a future date, the details of which will be communicated to members in due course. Point of order.
Mr McNulty opened the session with a rather dodgy point of order on sport, and I'd like to do the same to close. Every member in the House today has signed a round-robin open letter to the International Gymnastics Federation deploring their decision to bar 3 of our sports people from competing in the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham and asking them to reverse that decision. So we haven't agreed on everything in this session of the Assembly, but every member has stood firm on this point, and I wish to thank them for their solidarity.
I thank Mr. Despot for that point of order. On a I can assure you I didn't touch any buttons. I wish, on a personal level, I wish to apologise for any errors I may have made during the proceedings today, but I am available for any future bookings as and when required. The question is that the Assembly do now adjourn. The Assembly is adjourned. Thank you.